Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. Been more clear that whether you're a Fortune 500 behemoth or a small to medium-sized business, cybersecurity has got to be a top priority on your leaders list. And that's why Proxy co-founder Logan Speights and I are going to break down what you can do as an SMB leader to guard against breaches and break-ins and bots. Oh my. I'm Bryon Morrison. Welcome to the leaders list. Logan Speights, glad to have you on the leaders list today.
Hey there, Bryon.
Listen, we are really lucky at Proxy to have you as our head of technology because you've also sat in the chair as CEO of a growing, scaling SMB. So I think what's best about your approach to technology is just the fact that you have a really rational perspective on it and a business-minded perspective. So I'd like to take you through a few questions about cybersecurity. Obviously, it's important, but let's start out with just like, how do you think about the definition of cybersecurity?
Sure. So, I mean, there are a number of definitions out there, especially in the world today, and it can cover a wide gambit of different topics. Ultimately, for me, I look at cybersecurity just like I look at any security. So if I'm going to put locks on my front door, if I'm going to put cameras in so I can monitor what's going on, I'm going to do the same thing with my data. And so that's really the practical approach to it. If you're going to secure your physical location, secure your digital footprint as well.
It's great. That's so simple. I love it. And part of that is strategic, right? I mean, you can decide, look, I'm not going to put locks on my doors and I don't care. And so I'm not going to keep anything of value in there. But what do you say to the CEOs of SMBs that say, hey, look, that's a Fortune 500 problem. I don't have anything of value. Why would I worry about it?
Sure. So I want to take a little bit of a step back there. The truth of the matter in today's world is literally everyone is a target. Bryon, you and I are a target personally for our individual stuff in our households. Small businesses are targets. Corporations are targets. Large enterprises are targets. Military complexes are targets. I mean, governments are targets. So literally there is not a group out there that is quote unquote safe from cybersecurity, because ultimately a lot of these attacks are automated these days, and so they tend to be crimes of opportunity and not necessarily targeted crimes. Now, don't get me wrong, that happens, but that is typically what those SMB leaders are talking about. Going, nobody's going to target me. I'm not big enough. You're probably right. But there are bots and other things that are going on around that if they happen to land in your system, we don't really have the right to say that I don't have anything valuable that anybody would want. Really, the people who get to decide if there's any value in what's taken from you are the bad actors after they've already compromised your system, right? They'll compromise your system, they'll get in there, and then at that point, they're going to go, okay, there was nothing of value in there, but they have a hook into your system, and you're already compromised, and you have to deal with that. And so that really is a big deal. So the other side of that is a lot of SMBs look at what they have inside of their company. I don't have any IP. I don't have anything that somebody would want to take from me. They don't take into account the people that they're working with. And so a lot of SMBs work with and have clients who are larger organizations. And especially if you start getting into enterprise, that's where it gets dangerous, because they can compromise you. And not only can they get work through you into the larger organizations, but then you are that attack vector. So instead of it being just the cybersecurity issue, you're compromising that actual contract, that long-term relationship, and ultimately the finances of your business, all because you weren't paying attention to cybersecurity.
Man, so a small to medium-sized business can essentially become a Trojan horse that a cybersecurity or that a hacker could use to get into your clients. That's a great point.
So Bryon, if you'll remember back in 2023, That's how the bad actors got into the casinos. We think casinos, super security. We love watching the movies of people trying to break into the vaults. You've got to know that they're doing the same amount of security around all their data as well, especially because so much of it is digitized nowadays. The way that they got into that compromise was they compromised a third-party vendor who then reset a password for someone supposedly at the casino, and that's how they got in and were able to compromise that system.
If we're talking about organizations like casinos, they get hacked and they have teams that are working against this, right? I mean, they have a CISO, a chief information security officer. They have that kind of commitment. When we're talking about small to medium-sized businesses, 500 employees and fewer, you probably have great technologists, or you may have that, but you probably don't have a CISO. So where do you start?
I'll go back to my previous statement. You start with a security first mindset, right? And so honestly, half the battle is thinking through it and then making a plan to secure it. And if I continue to draw that parallel, you could secure your front door with a lock that you buy at a big box store, or you could get a Fort Knox kind of vault door that goes on your business. What is the need? I think the same thing applies here. You're still thinking about it, and then what can you do? The beauty of a lot of us being technologists in today's world is a lot of this is a technology play. There's a ton of technology out there that does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. They can scan your links, they can scan your email stuff, they can look for those bad actors. Everything that comes in is monitored, and everything that goes out is monitored. So start talking PII, start talking about, hey, I'm sending out financials. How do we get that encrypted before it goes out? So there are tools that you can put in place that are easy. And so that is the easiest entry for a lot of people. Unfortunately,
so let me just make sure I heard that correctly. So what you're suggesting is that a lot of the platforms and technology tools that people already use have some cybersecurity elements built into it. So the question is, do you understand those, and are you making sure that those are on, working, and doing their job?
That's correct. And so a lot of your major things will have two-factor authentication. They'll have password rotations. They'll have those types of things. Make sure that those are turned on. On top of that, you have cybersecurity tools that you can partner with an MSP or somebody like that to have running on your systems that will monitor on another level. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, a lot of small business leaders stop there. They go, we've done the stuff that are in our system. We bought a security package. We're done, right? The biggest issue and the largest vector of attack that we see is the human. It's our employees. It's the people who are actually sitting at the chair. That is the easiest thing to exploit. And so you have to, in addition to getting things set up, it's a continual training and instilling that mindset into your people so that they don't do anything crazy, right? They aren't clicking on that link. They aren't opening that attachment. They aren't going to those websites. But even past that, one of my favorite red team tactics, if I'm trying to get in anywhere, is drop a USB stick in a parking lot. Because the first thing 90% of people do is they go, oh, that's a 4 gigabyte drive. I wonder whose it is. I wonder what's on it. And they walk in and they stick it into their computer. They've really compromised your entire system.
Wow.
And that really is one of those easiest attack vectors. And so that training becomes pivotal in keeping it front of mind for all of your people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that's literally like opening the door and walking someone in who's clearly an individual that's a problem.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So, we had a client that talked to us about cybersecurity, and I thought it was a really smart perspective on it. He said, I consider it like the finances of our business. I have to have reporting. I have to have consistent data. I have to have some element of that. And so then the human side of that is I may have somebody who does the books for a little while, and then that turns into a controller, and then that turns into a fractional CFO, and then that turns into a full-time CFO, and then that turns into an investment M&A strategist. And so there's different degrees of expertise. And what you just talked about for cybersecurity made a ton of sense, right? I mean, use the platforms you have first, and then go into those other stages and keep doing training, the human aspect of it. What should an SMB be thinking about? What should a CEO be thinking about in terms of specialists and having those levels of expertise available to them? Like, when do you need the expert around cybersecurity that's going to go beyond the person who has kind of an idea about it?
That's right. So typically, as early as you can is the honest truth, right? How long would you wait before you put a lock on the front door of your office, right? And so more and more, it's got to be critical or foundational to your operation. Now, whether that's a lot of times the CEO themselves getting educated on it, knowing that, building it in. From there, it's also easy to tap one of your technologists, because hey, part of your job is kind of looking at some of our cybersecurity at a basic level and making sure that we're covered. So you can start moving it down into that. And then when you start scaling up to a point where you are working with another technology provider, I love putting that in terms of MSP providers, right? If you're doing a help desk, if you're doing other technology, if people are dealing with your printers and your computers and your networks, that's a great time to bring that in, because most of those organizations have an offering for cybersecurity that's just an add-on to the stuff that you're already going to be doing.
That's a great point. And then I would imagine there's also, it probably makes sense early on to find a consultant, a fractional lead, someone who can step in crisis. So you probably have to have a crisis plan in place, right? I mean, just in case, what happens when the inevitable, somebody clicks on the wrong link? Mm-hmm. So there's got to be some sort of a crisis plan. And there's probably, an annual check that makes sense. Even if, I love your point about, like, let's bring along a technologist in the organization that's interested in it. You get them training, you get them to start to continue to improve their knowledge of it. But then, do you work with a large firm? Do you work with an individual? How do you start to build that relationship? I personally would think about it kind of like a doctor, right? I mean, I don't know if I need a doctor, but I do know I need somebody I can check in with once a year, and that's a requirement. So that person connects me to every other specialist I need. So that would be my perspective. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's great. And a lot of that becomes foundational, right? When you reach out to somebody, becomes a part of that strategic or that security first mindset of how am I putting this together? What are those parts and pieces? So even when we start getting into that, yes, you need somebody to reach out to in a crisis mode. Okay. Typically, one of the first things that they're going to do is go, okay, so what sort of impact does this have to your business? And for a lot of SMBs, that turns into ransomware is one of the biggest things that really can paralyze a business. And so, yes, you need somebody you can call, but there are simple things that you can do that don't take expert cybersecurity knowledge to get in place, like a backup system for your data. If you have a ransomware attack, everything's locked down. You can go, great, I lost 2 days worth of data. You can have that, and we go right back to business. And so typically you want to look and see what is the acceptable downtime for your organization. And that sets kind of a baseline for those backup strategies. And so again, that's not some highly technical looking at the packets coming in and out of your network to see what's happening. You have professionals for that. But a lot of it is just that common sense of, if something happens to this, what contingency plans are in place? And a backup system solves 99% of those.
Yeah, backup system, great risk mitigation.
Right.
That's great. Okay, Logan, any parting thoughts that you'd want to share for our leaders out there around cybersecurity?
Yes. It's getting harder. And I hate saying that, but with the generative AI revolution that's happening right now, a lot of the tools and techniques that bad actors have been using for decades, all the way back to like physical, like I'm going to get on premise and open your file cabinet, they're doing the same things over and over again. What generative AI is allowing them to do is make it incredibly personal and making it and building in that relational stuff. There are tools out there right now that we can go pay a subscription to, and within minutes, we're talking not only just an email that sounds like an email that you would send, Bryon, we can get audio and potentially even video out there. So you could have a conversation like we're having here, and you aren't, and it's not you. And so in those situations, it's becoming harder and harder to know what is real and what's not. So it's got to roll back into that security side of it, right? Or the training and security side, having that mindset instilled to go, would Bryon really call me and tell me to go buy a bunch of Xbox gift cards, right? Probably not. And speaking as an executive, if one of my employees gets a phone call like that from me, even video, and they go, I'm 90% sure that that's what he wants. If after we hang up the call, after we get off the video, if you pick up the phone again and call back, because again, the phone number will look like it's coming from me. It'll sound like me on the phone. But if I hang up and then call you directly, I can go, hey, I just wanted to verify. And then, so just little things like that. If it smells fishy, double check. With the generative AI revolution that's happening, we as small business owners are taking advantage of all the good uses of that technology. Bad actors are as well. And so we have to be aware of those types of things. And so again, back to that security first mindset and making sure that we're training our people to be thinking about that so that we ultimately don't lose business. Because again, it just takes one wrong click. You're compromised. You compromise one of your major clients. You lose that major client, and the impact that makes to your business is substantial.
Well, you can be out of business. I mean, I can't help. I can't thank you enough, Logan, for taking us through this, because cybersecurity is a CEO level initiative. If even if you do have a CIO, or a head of technology in some form or fashion, the CEO needs to be aware of that plan, know exactly what's happening, and then champion that in the organization. They have to let the people, the humans that you're talking about, know that it is a high priority and you mean it. And so if somebody makes that call twice, just to confirm, you're not going to give them a hard time. You're going to say thank you for caring enough to do it. So yeah, in summary, incredibly important, not something you can just push off and check a box and think you're done with it. And cybersecurity is something that's going to continue. There's always going to be bad actors, and they're always going to continue to improve their game. So at minimum, it's got to be on your radar. That's great. Thanks, Logan, for being on the leaders list. Bottom line, folks, get started on this tomorrow. Let us know how we can help.